Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. For our case council, we decided to focus on opportunity zones and more specifically how the District of Columbia will implement them and what are possible issues that may arise with this program. But first of all, I'm going to introduce our team. So I'm Natalie with Devin, Aziz, Debbie, and Elizabeth. So a quick overview, what are opportunity zones? So it's a new community development program that was created under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And their objective is to bring in economic opportunities to low-income communities and also create a tax incentive for investors. So each state has the chance to nominate 25% of census tracts that are considered low income, and then submitted to the Department of Treasury, and they will certify the opportunity zones per state. And then Opportunity Funds is an investment vehicle that you can set up as either a partnership or a corporation, and it allows for investors to invest in projects and specific opportunity zones. And they will also be certified by the Department of Treasury. So more specific for the District of Columbia, Mayor Bowser, she nominated 25 tracts in April, and then by May, the Department of Treasury certified all of them. So these are all of the certified tracts in the DC area, and as you can see, it's mostly in the Ward 847 districts. So now I'm going to pass it to Devin, who's going to talk more about the stats.
All right. So opportunity zones is a relatively new concept. The law only came out about a year ago. Within that time, the states had a certain period to go ahead and nominate their tracts. So they come up with 57% of the time were nominated as opportunity zones. Of course, states do still have to limit that down to only 25% of their states. Within a few months, 18 states and U.S. territories have decided to go ahead and nominate their opportunity zones. They have all been now approved by the Department of Treasury. 30% of the areas nominated had poverty lines that fell below the average limit. But then on the flip side, 28% of those communities that were selected were either not considered not poor, college campuses, or had no one living in the area at all. And as Natalie pointed out earlier, in DC, we already have the 25 tracts that have been approved and authorized, and over 2/3 of those coming in that Ward 7 and 8 area. Now, one case study we can focus on for the opportunity zones is Mississippi. They already put all their opportunity zones out, and there has been an overwhelming amount of problems with who they've chosen. So there was a very small percentage of them that were in selected distressed neighborhoods in the Mississippi area. Those areas tend to have lower poverty lines, as well as higher appreciating value of the property. Out of the worst 10% of communities in Mississippi, only 11% were nominated and approved for opportunity zones. If we take a look at this is kind of some graphs that kind of show you where Mississippi stands in line with everything else. So at the negative 10% of distress rate, compare that to somewhere like California and Georgia, who are almost near 50% of the distressed neighborhoods were selected as opportunity zones. 11% of the worst 10% neighborhoods were selected, as I spoke on before. And I think the biggest stat that came to my attention, appreciating home value. There's a nearly 20% of appreciating home value in these opportunity zones selected by Mississippi, whereas somewhere like Vermont has a 10% depreciation value. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Aziz to talk a little bit more about the process.
So looking at the selection process for opportunity zones, it typically involves 3 phases. So the first phase is that after the Opportunity Zone program was in effect that included in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, governors in each state need 90 days in order for them to submit their selections of potential areas. And then after that, we move on to the second phase where the Department of Treasury works with investors to secure funds for the Opportunity Fund. And then after that, they go through the final process in that they secure the funds and now they implement the program to designated areas. And when talking about opportunity zones, there are 3 main stakeholders involved. The first stakeholder being the government. So essentially this program was implemented by them, and so they have a keen interest in helping communities in need, and helping communities that have not received a lot of investments as compared to other areas of the United States. And we're going to focus in this presentation also, and Debbie's going to talk a little bit more about that, about the city of Washington, D.C. as a focus and what they're doing here in this area. The second stakeholder would be the investors. Obviously, there's tax incentives in this program, so they want to take advantage of that and invest what they have in assets in these areas. And the final stakeholder, and probably the most important one, would be the communities. So these are the people living in these designated areas, and so they're the ones who are going to be affected the most by it. And they want to see a lot of developments, they want to see job creations happening to their communities, and they also want to see sustained economic development happening. And now I'm going to pass it on to Debbie, who's going to talk about the city of Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Aziz. So I'm going to be talking about the company focus at the District of Columbia. So the main focus that they're trying to do is to provide innovative housing developments for the growing community or population. And in order to do that, they need to obtain 25 opportunity tracks that would demonstrate investment opportunities, such as creating commercial retail activity, employment opportunities, real estate projects, and commercial corridors. So in order to do that, there's a selection process. The first is mapping options. So they need to look at which area they would like to invest in underdeveloped areas, as well as gathering public input, analyzing data, and then finally determining the 25 opportunity zones. And in order to do that, they're looking at the Ward 7 and Ward 8 neighborhoods because they must have a higher need for employment, have investment opportunities that will bring desirable employment and amenities, as well as concrete opportunities to benefit existing residents and public support. And now I'm going to hand it off to Elizabeth.
Okay, so if we were to move forward with this case, there are a number of problems that we do anticipate. The first one being gentrification. We're all familiar with that from our tour yesterday and the case that we've done before. So one of the commitments that we would need to see through this is keeping affordable housing within the community. So sticking with 60 to 30% below the area median income. Additionally, we would need a commitment for the local employment opportunities. We need to make sure that the companies that are investing into businesses in the community are also employing the same people that live within that neighborhood. The second thing we foresee happening is inadequate implementation of funding. Obviously, opportunity zones present a really incredible opportunity. However, we need to make sure that the objective of the program is actually being seen throughout the whole process, and that the funding is actually benefiting the community itself. Kind of going along with that, there needs to be a way that we can actually evaluate the success of this program. And finally, community land trusts. So community land trusts are land within a community that is dedicated just to affordable housing, communal space, green space, places that actually develop a community into a real neighborhood. So that land has the potential to be lost with this continuing investment. So that we would need to make sure that that land remains in the hands of the community. We came up with a couple questions, and we are excited to hear yours as well, but mainly focusing on how can we make this a sustainable long-term investment? Second, how can we minimize the rising cost of living? And thirdly, how can we be even more creative? Because we've talked about employment and we've talked about housing, but actually building a community and building a neighborhood is so much more than that, and so how can we bring that essence into the community? So, thank you.
Okay.
Well, I have a question about the AMI and the low-income housing. So are you saying that you use the AMI to kind of set the price that like low-income individuals would be paying?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let's hypothetically, let's say someone, because it's the medium income, right? Medium.
Yeah, so that is the regulation that they use to determine affordable housing. So moving forward with that and making sure that that doesn't get lost. I mean, I do think personally you shouldn't be paying 60% of your income. That's unreasonable and unrealistic, but that is the guidelines that they've used to determine affordable housing.
Anything else?
Good job.
Keith?